listening to Not Good Enough, an inadequate response to inadequate responses. I'm Tom Lang.
I'm Tom McLean.
I'm Evie.
I'm Mitch Alexander. We've also got producer Isaac here as well. We've got a bunch of things to talk about today, so let's hit the top news of the hour. Australia is still on fire, but it's all contained.
Yeah, we're good.
We actually got it to a point where the bushfires are still raging, but they are as controlled as fires in the bush can be.
Does it basically just mean we know where all the fires are and can kind of predict what they're going to do?
Not just predict what they're going to do, but we're fairly sure that no one is at risk. We're fairly sure we can control them. We're fairly sure that they're not going to get out of hand in a way that means we can't essentially deal with it, which is really cool.
It's also well timed because it's autumn.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. the fires are. Oh, I mean, to be fair, no doomerism podcast, but March is also one of the worst months for bushfires in the country.
Oh, is it?
So we may still have another month, but I mean, that's the thing. This is good news that we are coming into the last month where we're expected to have bad bushfires, and they are all contained, as opposed to just people running around a control room in the background like, no. So this is good.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
This is pretty good. In even better news, the corruption scandal, Sports Rorts, continues to go on and on and on and on and on and on and on.
Wait, didn't we agree that it's not sports rorts anymore? It's just
Rorts,
everything
rorts.
rorts?
It's just corruption.
Yeah.
I think, and this sort of speaks to the way the mainstream media needs to talk about things, but calling it sports rorts because it rhymes, it's a cool little title. We're overlooking a whole bunch of other corruption that's taken place, like some of the other grants that were given out before the election that had no oversight.
It's sort of gone from a thing where it's we've got this cool branded catchphrase. We've got sports rorts, and you can buy the sports rorts tote bag or whatever. And there's each new week, there's been a whole new rort that comes out. And at a certain point, you're like, should we have a sort of catchy name for this? Or should it just be anybody who's talking about it just staring sort of grey face down the barrel of the camera, just being like, what the fuck? Everyone's so corrupt. What do we do? Everyone's been caught red-handed. Nobody's even acknowledging it. They're just doing it again and again. And nobody's going to prison.
Yeah.
Nobody's even losing their job. What is happening? But sports rorts is still catchy though. You know?
Yeah, it's snappy.
Silly.
Yeah.
So the one thing that we want to talk about as well is that it's becoming increasingly clear that the entire sports rorts corruption affair, whatever we haven't decided on calling it yet, was an attempt to clear house just before the election.
It seems like it. Again, we on Not Good Enough, we're not going to cast aspersions and say we know the hearts of men and give. We're not going to say we know intent.
We're not even going to claim that we believe Scott Morrison has a heart.
Exactly. But a lot like Andrew Bolt, we're not saying it was a deliberate attempt at poison pill policies to make sure that the Labor Party, who everyone was sure was going to win, would have a hard time governing. So in the 4 years in opposition, they could establish themselves as a good opposition party and get in later after some of their friends got really good private sector jobs. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it looks an awful lot like it, which is crazy.
Yeah, I'm saying that, I'm not saying they are corrupt, but I'm saying that if I went into the government trying to be corrupt and I ended up where they are, I would be real proud of my work.
I'm saying they are corrupt. I think there's enough evidence. She had color-coded spreadsheets. There's the thing. So the main news story is Channel 10 has been doing a bunch of reporting on they've got just essentially first-hand accounts that Scott Morrison, our Prime Minister, had a direct involvement in the sports rorts scandal directing of funds. It's just the thing that they're I'm not insinuating that. Onslin is saying that.
Yeah, spending taxpayer money on Liberal Party election campaigning.
Yeah. But what we've also got is reporting from The Guardian states that a senior public servant destroyed notebooks, which included notes taken during a hastily convened sports grant teleconference, called after the then Sport Australia chief learned of the colour-coded spreadsheets being used by Bridget McKenzie's office to award the grants. Which essentially means that a senior staffer, someone involved in the background running of the government, got a whole bunch of notes involving this corruption and went, best get rid of them once I'm done with my time in office. No one's going to want to look at them in the future.
She was like,
look, I don't know about you, but I know that whenever I've participated in massive crimes that I always destroy evidence immediately afterwards because I feel like that's the right thing to do.
Again, though, that's an unrelated point. You're not saying she committed a crime.
I'm just saying that is something that I do.
What you do is destroy the evidence of your crime, and we're talking about some notebooks being destroyed.
Yeah, that's right.
Nothing to compare to the two. There's no bridge there.
No, not at all.
Also, they're corrupt. So yeah, it's apparently that is, if memory serves, that is something that some staffers or a lot of staffers do. I mean, it at least came out at the beginning of this sports rot scandal that like at the end of their time in a portfolio or when staffers move on, they do sometimes ceremoniously destroy notes, which isn't unprecedented. There's a there's a famous story of edit point. Okay. There's a lot of academics that will do that as well. They'll finish up their PhD or a book or something and for some reason destroy all their notes. Like this is back in the 17th, 18th century. That was a thing that was...
Yeah, but they won't finish it and then claim the PhD never happened.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man, it's kind of sad, honestly. Like I looked up this staffer because I was like, should we be saying that? She's not a staffer. She's like a department head. Her name's Glenys Beecham, and she's like been working in the Australian public sector for years and years and years and years. She's like a very senior official.
Which is why she knows what she's doing.
It's why she knows what she's doing, but it's also like all I know of this woman outside of the stuff that I looked up this morning is, oh, she's the one that covered up Scott Morrison's corruption. Like, way to fucking torch your career, you idiot.
I mean,
like, what have you achieved? Well, you did like your sort of shady crime shit.
See, this is assuming
career other than that. If you're high up in the Liberal Party,
She's not high up in the Liberal Party. She's high up in the public service.
oh, she's not even in the party.
no.
No, she's a public servant.
Yeah, she's not a staffer, quote unquote, but she is like, one of those public servants that is around no matter who's in power. And their whole thing is that they're supposed to be as impartial and non-partisan as possible so that when ministers come in after an election, if there's a change in government or a new minister comes into the portfolio, there is a support network of people that know what they're doing and can help them.
Well, look, she still knows where the bread is buttered.
Yeah, she's the secretary of the Department of Health, or she was,
Yeah.
until she resigned and then used her last act to, well, let's not get into it.
And also follow up on the class war. That
Oh,
we
yeah,
were
a
talking
follow-up
about.
updates from the front.
So you may not have heard that the Scott Morrison government has. This seems insane to say that has given an amnesty scheme for reporters to sort of just admit publicly that they haven't been paying superannuation and that you won't get in trouble during.
Well, like maybe like not paying enough superannuation.
They've
But,
been
like,
ripping off their employees.
We've been underpaying our workers, and the government's like, look, if you come clean, you're clean, you're fine. You can just say, and as long as you pay them back
with interest.
with interest,
Yep.
it's all good. And over 7,000 companies have come forward being like,
So
oh,
wild.
it was us, we were doing it.
Yep.
Which means they knew.
Which means they knew.
They had the books right there.
so is Target, who are underpaying superannuation, and Bunnings, like all part of that umbrella of, I think, is it Wesfarmers? That's right. Were they part of this scheme as well?
Yeah.
Or was the scheme announced afterwards?
They self-reported the wage stuff.
And keeping in mind, this is probably millions of dollars of super.
Yeah.
This is money that has been basically stolen from the employees of these companies, and the government has gone, fess up, and it's fine. We'll let you get away with that millions of dollars, pay it back, and we're all good. Now, this is running at the same time as they're still trying to claw money out of unemployed people with Centrelink robo-debt kind of thing. Probably much less money. Most of those people have definitely not done anything wrong. Can you imagine them going, all right, tell you what, we'll just do an amnesty on all Centrelink debts. We'll cancel all your robo-debts. We'll give you all the benefit of the doubt. No harm done.
Yeah, just self-report if there was any like Centrelink crime that you ever did, if there was any bludging of the dole that you did, and just you can pay it back and we're all good. It's like, no, they would never.
It would be insane.
They would never do that.
But here's the thing that got me about the superannuation scheme. Like this rort is essentially like banking on the fact that employers barely check their monthly wage, let alone their super contributions. Like I was employed by one company for about 4 years. I didn't know my password into my super that they set up for me. I was never fucking checking it. I may have been underpaid that entire time as well. I don't know.
It's true. And I wouldn't know how to tell, honestly. I don't know how
Exactly.
much super I'm meant to be getting.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So it's listed as a percentage of your wage that your employer has to pay into a future fund. And that's the other thing that got me as well, is that it seems like mustache twirlingly evil to just be stealing from your employees' futures. Like while you're with us, yeah, sure, we're giving you all the wage you could need today. And then you get to retirement age, you're like, fuck, where's all my money?
I don't even think it's like them trying to steal the money. It's them like a lot of the things that you see when people are caught in these underpayment scandals is like, oh, but the award wage is like really complicated to navigate, blah, 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 blah.
It's not.
And it's like, one, it's not that complicated to navigate. If you're running a business, that's one of your jobs. You should just do that. And if you can't do it, hire somebody who can. They're called accountants. You can hire them.
Presumably
You already
you have
fucking
hundreds.
have, for sure. But the thing about the award wage is it's not that difficult to navigate, but it's really, really easy to navigate. Like so easy if you just pay people any amount more than you are minimally required to pay them. Like the only thing about minimum wage is you're not allowed to dip below it. But if you go a bit above it, like if I pay you 10% more than minimum wage and then I accidentally underpay you 5%, I haven't committed any crime. I'm still 5%. I'm fine.
Yeah.
So it's only fucking if you decide like, oh, well, you know, you're on minimum wage, which means I would pay you less if I could get away with it.
Yeah.
That's what minimum wage means.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, in order to, even if you're doing everything totally legally and above board, in order to skate along that absolute minimum wage line where you're paying your employees the absolute minimum you can get away with, you have to be employing that little platoon of accountants to make sure you're not doing anything wrong, which means now you're paying those accountants probably much, much more than you would be paying any minimum wage employer. So you're like, I will happily spend a shitload of money so that I don't have to pay my employees any more than I absolutely have to, so I can make as much profit as possibly can at any cost.
It works the same with the taxation office, but essentially, like, you can do modeling if you are a large enough business to sort of go, all right, every dollar that I give to one accountant, I have maybe 450 employees. For every accountant that I give $1 to, if I could scrape back 50 cents off each one of those employers, that's like $225 per dollar. So I'm going to be making hand over fist so long as I have someone making sure I am either on the minimum wage or making sure that they're complicit in not underpaying my workers, which seems to be widespread because 7,000 companies. Like that's...
And that's also when they announced the amnesty. When they announced the amnesty, 7,000 companies over the course of a year or so came forward. That's like, if I'm like, hey, it's amnesty time. If you're like running a business, you're going to be like, oh, hey, they're announcing an amnesty. Everybody, now's our opportunity to really double check. Everybody hit the books and like look over all the line items to make sure that we're okay because the amnesty is the time to turn it in. Nobody's doing that. They're like, no, I mean, if you think that you're overpaying it, if you think that you're underpaying your workers, now's the time to turn it in. If you think you're not, you're just like, oh, they announced an irrelevant thing that doesn't apply to me.
Yeah.
I should point out as well that when they got rid of penalty rates or compulsory penalty rates 2 years ago, they already gave some indication that this was going to happen. They said the whole thing of like, you know, oh, it's so difficult to calculate what our employees are really entitled to. It's bullshit.
Yeah.
Not only do you have accountants, you have software that you can do these things really easily.
Or
and
like the website.
Or the website.
The minimum amount you're supposed to be paying. That's the
I
thing.
can
Like,
do with an
really
Excel
easy.
spreadsheet, honestly.
Did you read this article about this guy? Like, okay, no bosses should ever be venerated in any way. I just want to put that out straight up. But there's this guy who runs this business where he pays everyone a minimum of like $70,000.
Oh, yeah.
This guy, Dan Price from Seattle, he said, you know what? It's changed my life because obviously I've had to sacrifice part of my pay to make sure that everyone else gets this. But it means that we're more profitable than ever. So even by capitalist standards, increasing the minimum wage to such a high amount has improved productivity for everyone.
Turns out employees who feel valued and well paid and less stressed about money can do better work.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating article, so it'll be in the show notes. But like his thing of like, oh yeah, I talked to some of my lower paid employees and I realized that they were struggling to make rent. And I was like, man, that sucks. And then he sort of went home and was like, that sucks.
Yeah.
I'm going to fix that. And then he just ended up with happy employees who like him and like their work and everyone.
When a boss
doing
gets
great.
class consciousness.
Yeah, I'd do a lot for $70,000 a year. It's worth noting too, he didn't just cut his wage, quote unquote. Like to get into this whole scam properly, he remortgaged his house and he sold his own shares.
Yes.
He did a whole bunch of reshuffling to make sure that it was actually working still. It wasn't just like, oh, now I'm poor and my employees are rich.
Yeah.
He bothered
Yeah.
with the code, which is more than those 7,000 companies could do to
Yeah.
make sure that their employees stayed on the bare fucking minimum and had their super paid. Anyway,
If he can do the accounting, then anyone else can.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so now, surprise, surprise, some of these companies are pushing for a wage amnesty.
Yeah.
So they can.
Following the success of the superannuation thing, where a bunch of criminals got off scot-free.
And just what the.
Now,
Part of me-
after the wage amnesty, we're doing a corruption sports grants amnesty as well. Just-
For real though,
General amnesty for anybody with more than this amount of money.
yeah.
part of me thinks that, like, you know, it is actually good that they're having their super paid back with interest. And if the only way to get that done is with a type of amnesty, part of my initial reaction is to go like, oh, well, okay, fine, maybe. But even then, only if there was also large scale reform coming in to go, and we're going to make sure it doesn't happen again. As far as I know, this didn't follow any major legislation sweep. There was no public campaign with this. There's nothing to do with like harsher penalties for less like superannuation
No one
payment,
argued
whatever.
about the costings or what this would do to
didn't
the
change
morals of the
anything.
country.
Yeah, it was just an idea to go, hey, from right now, if you declare some crimes, you'll go free. With nothing going, and then you can start doing some crimes again straight after.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. And it's also wild that this is an example of something where they're like, we're going to do this thing, which seems counterintuitive because we're going to try and get these results. We're like, oh, the super gets paid back and people can start from a fresh slate. Let's compare that to something like drugs, where it's like, oh, if you have, you know, amnesty on pills at festivals or pill testing with no cops or whatever, it will provably get results and less danger and less hospitalizations and stuff. And everyone goes, oh, nah, but then if you're letting them get away with it, that's going to encourage them to do pills. Yeah. Or, but they're doing the wrong thing. It's just drugs are bad. Why aren't they getting angry? But these guys have done a crime. They've done a really bad crime that has hurt a lot of people, and you're letting them get away with it. What's to stop them doing more crimes? Why isn't the same moral argument being applied?
You're just encouraging them. If you give them amnesty on these superannuation underpayments, they'll keep underpaying in the future.
Yeah, and I mean,
tell
if
you
we
exactly
start
where
sending these bosses to prison, like we all know prison doesn't work. They're just going to get radicalized into neo-Nazis. That's the last thing that we want. So it's all legal.
Really buff millionaires being angry.
What else is in the news today? The Mardi Gras. You seen this? You heard about this?
Oh, God.
You heard about this?
don't just like include this clip. McLean, Mardi Gras. Oh, God.
Oh, the fucking Mardi Gras.
So,
The Liberal Party at the Mardi Gras.
Yeah, the Mardi Gras. Good.
Mardi Gras has happened. We're recording this the day after the Sydney Mardi Gras parade took place, and during the parade, some people jumped in front of the Liberal Party float, which depicted a version of the Endeavour.
Famously, the vessel that Captain Cook was riding before he sort of started colonizing Australia and setting off hundreds of years of genocide.
So, and just in case you weren't fully aware, or you need a bit of a refresher, the Liberal Party are the party that refused to issue an apology to the stolen generation. They're the party that refused to pass marriage equality when they could, and then force it eventually to a plebiscite. They're the party that tried to put in a whole bunch of different religious reviews and religious freedom clauses that they also then stymied the results of the Royal Commission into the sexual abuse in the Catholic Church.
They really hate gender-neutral bathrooms, and they're just a bunch of horrible old men.
And they currently still have religious discrimination laws ready to go.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a live issue there is these, well, if you don't let a Christian business owner fire a gay employee, aren't you really discriminating against the Christian there? Isn't that the real intolerance?
You're keeping in mind, these religious discrimination laws, they sound misleading. They're there to protect religious discrimination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Essentially, you can be homophobic at your workplace, and if you can prove it's to do with your religion, you'll be fine, hopefully, under the laws.
Those laws are pretty funny in that they seem to be so hastily drafted because they're just like, oh my God, the gays, they're allowed to get married. What can we do? What can we do? And they're just like furiously scribbling, you can fire a gay man. You're allowed to blah, blah, blah. And then they ship those laws through as quickly as they can. And then people start looking over and being like, wait, this law also just seems to allow you to fire Christians for being Christian? And you've got like the Bondi Church of Satan like releasing a press release being like, we fully support the passage of these laws and we intend to take advantage of them in as many ways as possible as soon as they're out. That's great.
It's funny that you made a joke about suddenly springing into action after doing this, after marriage equality, because that is exactly what has happened to all the anti-marriage equality organizations. Like, especially
they've pivoted into religious discrimination organizations.
They've pivoted into religious discrimination and also being against anti-trans kids.
Oh,
Yeah.
So they've all just changed their methodology slightly, just towards a different target now.
Yeah. So that's
people.
That
Not
party.
good enough says trans rights.
That party had a float at Mardi Gras. For some fucking reason. And so, as you can imagine,
a Captain Cook themed float at Mardi Gras. It really can't be emphasized enough that the homophobic anti-Indigenous rights party had a pro-genocide.
It was basically the HMS dog whistle.
So there were some protests. This is reported from SBS. The protesters, part of a queer activist group called the Department of Homo Affairs.
Shout out to them.
Yep, carried banners decrying the Liberal Party, whose official float travelled behind them.
The Department of Homo
It's fucking a great name.
And so that by itself, I think, is cool. Hell yeah, protest that at Mardi Gras, because we'll get in a little bit to why that's a really good thing. But the thing that fucking got my goat, so to speak, about this fucking thing was that the police were there at Mardi Gras, as you would expect them to be during a large-scale festival with thousands of people there. But they had the audacity to tweet out that after the arrest and the removal of people from this protest, they tweeted out that the New South Wales Police are disappointed with the protesters' actions, which did not comply with the conditions of the event or the spirit of the celebrations.
Yeah.
This got me wound up in so many different fucking ways. First and foremost, the fact that the New South Wales Police used the term "did not comply" with the spirit of the
Sorry,
celebration.
do you know what festival you're at? Again, just want to
Does anyone
clear
want
that
to
up.
explain what the spirit of Mardi Gras is?
Well, just no, I want to focus on the language first. Did not comply with the spirit of the celebration. I've tactically ascertained joy in this location. Shut the fuck up. Like, did not comply. You know, they did not comply with the orders of these loud jackboot cunts going, go on the ground, go on the ground. That's what they did.
Yeah.
But
So this is the New South Wales Police who were recently in the news for just conducting large-scale strip searches of minors without adequate supervision. Is that the same team?
that's them. That's them.
them.
That's those ones. Yeah.
Sound crap.
But so
Look, there's a picture of them with cupcakes beforehand.
Let's not get into the cupcakes.
we can get it. Well, I reckon we should get into the pink washing of the Mardi Gras event sometime soon. But what got me precisely about this tweet, and then the fact that like the New South Wales Police Force were behind this, and then what a lot of people I don't think understand fully is the history of Mardi Gras as an event on that actual day. It started as a protest.
That's
it
right.
started from queer people having to protest the conditions, particularly being oppressed by the New South Wales Police. And this isn't something that is trying to be sort of like pushed to the side by queer activists and just queer people in general. This isn't something that is hidden. For instance, you can go directly to the Mardi Gras website and read this exact quote. On a cold night in Darlinghurst, Sydney, in 1978, a small group of protesters formed to contribute to the international gay celebrations. The resulting police violence and arrests created a defining night in not only Sydney's LGBTQI community, but Australia's cultural heritage. Quote, you could hear them in Darlinghurst police station being beaten up and crying out from pain. The night had gone from nerve-wracking to exhilarating to traumatic all in the space of a few hours. The police attack made us more determined to run Mardi Gras the next year. So I'm sorry, but I find it a bit fucking galling for the New South Wales Police Force to tell anyone in any way that they did not comply with the conditions of the event or the spirit of the celebrations.
You might
fuck
say,
off.
You might say that being frog marched out of Mardi Gras by a cop is exactly the spirit.
Yeah, I have no time for that tweet. I also have no time for the commentators for the SBS coverage of the event, who they cut away from the actual protest as well in the coverage. And there was all this mumbling from the commentators about an unnecessary interruption. Fuck that. You know exactly what you're commentating, and for you to just wipe it away in the interest of it not being, consumable for your audience. And they're definitely going to edit out that
Getting
bit
in the way of your
in
nice
the repeat.
fluff story.
Yeah. It kills me. And it's just, I think there's been a lot of complaints, correctly, of course, in the last 10 years or so of just the direction in which Mardi Gras is turning, in which there's more corporations, there's more brands, as well as the inclusion of the police. And I think that the time has come for that argument to say, like, what is Mardi Gras to people now? What is Mardi Gras to its community? Is it just about, like, just taking money from banks and saying, hey, like, let's banks make ads about slurs?
Yeah, let's get some gay TMs around the city and some slurs, and let's have like ANZ have a big float. Like as someone near and dear to me said the other day, it's like, cool, they're still investing in fossil fuels, so they're going to be killing everyone, queers included.
Yeah,
like that's a big deal.
And this is something that happens anytime anything gets big enough, anything gets enough popular attention and support. Is you get these parasites going, here is a source of money and attention.
Hey, it happened to feminism.
It happened to YouTube. It happens to every single thing where people go, hey, this is cool. We're all on board this. Instantly, they're circling like vultures going, how do we monetize this?
Yeah.
And often that means, how do we corrupt it?
And
Because all of the people from marketing are sociopaths.
that's correct. and now there is just enough social credit now that the plebiscite has and the law has been passed that, gays can get married in Australia, that people from political parties now feel comfortable being in these parades. Fuck you, Albo. Fuck you, please.
Because they begrudgingly let it happen.
But
Yeah.
Penny Wong, special fuck you to you as well. Like, talk about throwing everyone under the bus and then turning up to this parade. Like, you could have chosen not to say anything.
So just
could have
context, what's the beef with Albo and Plebiscite? And
all of them made specific statements against gay marriage.
And so it's worth keeping in mind that, the plebiscite that had to go through in this country was because neither of the major parties had the backbone to just pass marriage equality when they could, when it was clear that the entire population wanted it.
yeah, every survey overwhelmingly in favour of it.
When we say marriage equality, we mean specifically undoing John Howard's correction to the Marriage Act.
Yeah, and that's the thing as well. It wasn't a long-term thing. It's not like we've never had it before in this country. It was just during the 90s, Howard went, oh, no, and changed it, and we just wanted to change it back, essentially. And so there's issues as well in that the Labor Party have policies in place where you can't vote against the party. I'm pretty sure that's part of the issue. So you have to toe the party line. There's internal negotiations that take place, but then once the party has a position, you're expected to vote along the party lines. There's no floor crossing.
Yeah.
Whereas the Liberal Party do allow that. Given that they are called the Liberal Party, they still have archaic laws in place internally that say you can make a conscious vote on certain things. None of them did, but they could have. So it's especially galling that both sides of our two major party system, once marriage equality gets placed, essentially in spite of them, that they will march happily down this parade as well. Like they should feel internal shame.
Yeah.
But also they should just be shouted out. The idea of like the purity politics of this, what the fuck are you talking about? No, they should be protested, not only at the parade, but everywhere they go. That's the thing. They should have glitter thrown on them everywhere.
So Penny Wong's specific quote was, "The party's position is very clear, and that is an institution between a man and a woman."
Marriage is between a man and a woman. Party's position is super clear. The plebiscite came through. Party's position is totally different, and we're also stoked on it. She should at least be at Mardi Gras protesting, being like, no, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Marriage is between a man and a woman. Like, that's the only time.
Yeah, isn't that what changing from the inside is supposed to be about?
I think that's just classic Labor Party thing. It's very plausible that Penny Wong was personally pro-gay marriage the entire campaign.
Yeah.
But the thing about being a Labor MP is you have to be willing to go up in front of the entire country and make a definitive statement about something you find morally reprehensible. It's because none of them have a spine. Like, inherently being part of the Labor Party is sacrificing your integrity the moment that you join up. That's why we see no action from Jed Kearney on refugee rights. There's just, we've got Joel Fitzgibbon with the pro-coal stuff.
Yeah.
Peter Garrett did nothing his entire time there. And then left.
At this point, because they were all well aware that the vast majority of voters supported this, and when the plebiscite came out, it was 70 or 80% of Australians were like, absolutely, gay marriage should be a thing. So despite most of the voters thinking it was fine, despite certainly chunks of the party probably thinking it was fine, they still, for some reason, had to toe that line of, No, the party's position is this is not okay. And it makes you wonder why they had that position.
Oh, I reckon special interest groups, Lane. Yeah. I reckon there might be some really rich, moneyed interests that have a personal vendetta against any type of like what they perceive as social degradation, and they've got the resources to go to our two major parties and go, do this thing for me, and I'll give you money, and they go, oh, okay.
I just don't think it's special interests when it comes to the Labor Party. I just think that they're just too afraid to give into something where they think the Liberal Party might have an advantage. So
they never want to expose any skin.
Exactly. And they think, oh, well, if the Liberal Party thinks Australia is really conservative, we're just going to agree with them.
Don't want to let them say we're a bit too out there and lefty.
This is the whole thing of like not wanting to be seen as like, soft-bellied leftists or anything like that. They just have to be exactly as conservative.
The Labor Party is a giant machine that's finely tuned to do nothing.
That loudly.
So this might actually be a good point to move into the thing I always like to lead into, which is climate change. Because the Labor Party, climate change is a great example of them not having a position that is any use at all. You'll notice if you've been following politics at all, the Labor Party is like, yeah, climate change is real. Yeah, it's a problem. But we still are very, very strongly pro-coal exports, pro-Adani, pro-fossil fuels for the foreseeable future. Yet somehow we want to get to zero emissions by 2050 while still burning coal. Yeah, you'll notice that makes no internal sense, and that's because they're absolutely scared. They're terrified to actually have a position. Because once you've got a position, someone can call you on it. While you don't have any position, you can't be called, but of course nobody likes you and you don't get votes.
And their roadmap of bloody no emissions by 2050 is just like, oh yeah, that's our goal, and we're not doing any direct details of policy. All we're saying is that like a vote for the Labor Party is a vote for our grandchildren to do something about climate change.
Yeah. 2050 is way too far away. That's insane. And zero by 2050 is what all the states have already decided to do. It's what the rest of the world has already decided to do. As kind of a bare minimum, probably that's something that we're just going to drift towards based entirely on market forces, and it's not nearly good enough. The whole point of the government should be they're pushing us as quickly as possible to zero emissions at practically any cost.
Yep.
Because we've already seen the costs we're paying right now. And
podcasts like this starting.
yeah, right? Do you want more podcasts like this? Because that's what you're going to get.
By 2050.
When we can't go outside, we're going to be stuck inside making fucking podcasts.
Solve the climate or get more podcasts. This is your final warning.
And a great example of the absolute rot inside the Labor Party is Joel Fitzgibbon, who is...
This guy.
If you saw literally anything he said out of context, you'd be like, oh, he must just be some Liberal Party pro-coal guy. Like, not even a centre Liberal Party guy. Like, pretty full on. No, it turns out he's in Labor.
Right.
So Joel Fitzgibbon is as big a coal guy as you'll find. He has this great tweet, which is... Resource Minister Keith Pitt is off to an inauspicious start, threatening a big new tax on Australia's wealth-creating gas sector just 2 days after his swearing in. The Morrison government is too focused on itself to deliver leadership and good policy. Now, hang on. This is a member of the Labor Party accusing the Liberal Party of taxing fossil fuels too much. What
Oh my God.
the fuck is this?
There's also this thing of like whenever he says something like that and people are like, this is a sign that the Labor Party is fundamentally pro-coal and cannot be trusted on climate change. And there's always a lot of like the sort of, Labor defenders being like, look, that's just Joel Fitzgibbon.
Yeah.
That's not the Labor Party. But Joel Fitzgibbon, what's his role in the Labor Party? Oh, he's the shadow minister for resources. Like, his position on coal
Is the Labor
Party's position on coal because the Labor Party said he's the coal guy.
Yeah. Who do you want representing resources for your party? Captain Cole.
But like Labor defenders, like all the water droplet people and stuff, they want to have it both ways where they think, well, he's just a guy who's in the party.
Yeah.
But also he's really powerful in that he does all policy. So which is it?
Yeah, this is like when they were talking about how Tony Abbott was too crazy to ever get elected, and he's a Fruit Loop even inside the Liberal Party. No one takes him seriously. Oh fuck, he's Prime Minister. Like as fucking Albo is fond of saying, the fish rots from their head, and but this party's corruption goes straight to the top, or whatever the fuck that means. It's nothing. But
Albo learned how to use a metaphor challenge 2020.
But to have Joel Fitzgibbon in the party is to say he embodies enough of the party to be representative of us. Like most of us would get fired if we went outside saying something about I don't know, something horrible, but in the name of our employer. Like we wouldn't be able to just go, yeah, in the name of my boss, I reckon, something racist.
Someone say something horrible. I say it on the podcast.
I reckon white people should be put in jail. But do you know what I mean? Like that at that point, your employer would have enough of a standing to go, oh, you can't say that representing us, so you have to leave. Yeah. So you can't say that about Joel Fitzgibbon. Oh, he's a kook over there. Like, no, he's not. And like fucking you said, he's the Minister of fucking Minerals. He's the energy guy. That's his.
Also, he's like the prime backstabber in the party. He just loves setting up coups.
He's a little hoglet for a backstab. He loves the politics. He's into it.
So here's the thing, though. We really can't argue that it's just him because he is just saying his party's position out loud.
As we know from Penny Wong.
Yeah.
You can't contradict the party's position.
And what he's saying isn't misrepresenting their actions in any way. They are very, very pro-coal. They're very, very pro-fossil fuels. They take massive amounts of donations from fossil fuels and mining industries. He says he wants to. He's part of the Friends of Coal Exports. Parliamentary. I think he might be one of the main. There's a Parliamentary Friends of Coal Exports club, which I don't understand. I thought that was just the government.
Is that like a golf club?
Yeah, it's so fucking teenager.
Do they have like wine club nights?
I mean, they absolutely do. That's the club that they publicly talk about. He's also an organising member of the secret Friends of Coal Club, which is called the Otis Club, which is where you get a whole bunch of Parliament, Laboury kind of people, and they hang around and have a secret dinner, and they talk about how they want coal to happen more.
Yeah, it's the club of people formed around the idea that Labor's current policy on fossil fuels is inadequately pro-fossil fuels.
It's absolutely a race to the bottom.
You need to get the official name is the Best Buds Otis Group. But what is the Otis Group? Is that the unofficial title for a group of people that just occasionally get together for dinner, or is it official?
It's named after the restaurant that they meet at.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's
okay,
secret also. Yeah. The existence of it was leaked by this guy because he's a friggin' political super brain. And it's basically all we know about it is it's a club of Labor guys. I think it's all Labor.
Yeah, it's all Labor.
Who get together and talk about how much they want coal and try and like push coal interests and do shadowy behind the scenes stuff. And the fact that you need to be shadowy behind the scenes stuff for coal in this government boggles the mind. What could they possibly be
Well, they
planning?
just want to like overthrow Albo to put something even more coal pro in there. Like that's the crazy thing about the Otis Group is that Labor already runs on a factional system. There's already a left faction and a right faction, and the Otis Group is a group of people within that faction.
Was this the group that Anthony Albanese didn't know existed until a reporter told him in an interview and asked him questions about it?
Know.
Yeah.
He knows.
Oh, yeah. He goes, what?
Oh, in my government.
The super group Friends Best Buds Forever group want to overthrow me. Fucking terms of that. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Anyway, so long story short, it's all fucked and coal is bad. And I don't actually want to go into what the Liberal LNP part of the government is doing, but I will, just a little bit, is Angus Taylor, who, if you're not familiar with the name, you should get a bit familiar. He's the government Minister for Energy and Emissions Reduction. So he's the guy in charge, and he's notorious for really hating renewables. Any, like wind and solar, the useful kinds of renewables that work, primarily wind and solar, he hates them. He thinks we've got too many already.
Yep. He's also just noteworthily the guy who was like into having corruption scandals around him before everybody joined that train. He had like so many, like he had a Section 44 thing over his head because he owned a business that was receiving government funding. There was another thing. He's secretly director of a company that accepted $80 million
That's
in like
the one.
Water buyback.
They just got a bunch more money for the same water to that company again we don't even know if they got the water the first time. Anyway, they're just siphoning.
He's just a guy who's really, really good at selling fictional things to the government for huge amounts of money and also being the guy who's buying those things.
Yeah. So he's the guy running our emissions reduction now, which he's decided is they're actually going to remove funding for wind and solar because he says wind and solar as standalone sources of energy are now commercially viable. So the government should not crowd out private sector investment. Hang on. He's saying we should stop subsidizing those sectors because they're commercially viable, and by removing funding from that sector, we'll help investment in the sector.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I mean, we've all run a business before. You know, when you're receiving a government fund, you're just like, that's it.
Yeah.
Don't need any more money.
And if any sector suddenly gets a lot of subsidies, all of the commercial bodies go, oh, we want to stay away from all that free money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, we don't want to get involved there. That's going to make it a little too easy to get off the ground.
Subsidies. Yeah.
There's one thing big investors hate. It's a sure thing with government backing.
Right.
Which is, I think part of the reason, props where props are due, it is pretty actually admirable for all the fossil fuel industries in this country to continue to get subsidies from the government.
They're clearly
Considering
struggling.
it seems like, I mean, based on the investment that they're getting, they haven't been commercially viable ever.
Yeah, you would assume so, but I mean, yeah, good on them for actually taking them up because it seems like a really tough thing to do.
We got to prop them up against those bullies in wind and solar.
I thought you were going to say we need to prop them up against the wall.
The industries in the abstract. Yeah.
And so
And the
the
CEOs.
government's also like pushing really hard for further like greater investment in coal power plants. And these plants are by all, and this is the Collinsville coal power plant, for example. Every little bit of research on this says there is no way this is commercially viable because a coal power plant has to repay its money over a huge amount of time.
That's why we need to give it the subsidies,
Well, exactly. And if there is even the slightest whiff of carbon pricing or competition from renewables or anything that happens in the world that is going to maybe make coal power a little bit less viable, and I'll give you a hint, like that's exactly what's happening all over the world yesterday. This plant is just not going to make money back. And they're like, the only way this is going to be commercially viable is if we insulate it from the impact of any future carbon pricing with taxpayer money. And they're seriously considering this. They're saying, we're just going to pay this coal power plant to exist despite free market influence, world influence, possible future carbon price. We've got to protect this coal at any cost.
We need coal, Lang, because I'm just going to see how much of a silence I can put in the edit. But
Cricket.
You've been listening to Not Good Enough. But here's the thing. We've got a long-standing quote-unquote theory on the show that both sides of politics really want to like get themselves into cushy jobs after their time in Parliament, usually in the fossil fuel sector, the Mineral Council, whatever. But I just don't know at what point their self-interest is going to kick in and they look at market forces and go, fuck, fossil fuels aren't going to be profitable soon, so I don't want to be a member of the Queensland board.
It depends how much more longer BHP is going to keep paying them.
But that's what I don't understand is that even like at what point is it going to kick over and it's just like, you can BHP Billiton can give me less future investment.
I'll tell you when they've figured out when the fossil fuel industry is going to stop being personally beneficial to them. Mm-hmm. And that's probably the end date that they've just announced that they're going to phase out fossil fuels by.
Yeah.
And here's the
Was
thing,
it like
fossil fuel
2050?
The fossil fuel industry is already not commercially viable. It's already an economic just death spiral.
Yeah.
The only reason it's still doing anything in Australia is because the government keeps propping it up. So they're going, okay, we're going to cushy fossil fuel jobs after this. The government that follows us keeps propping that up. They're fine.
I'm good.
Yeah.
So because Australia is currently subsidising the fossil fuel industry to the tune of $29 billion a year,
Holy
which is $1,200 per person.
I don't think I pay that in tax.
Well,
On average, $1,200.
But that's what I'm saying. So like that's how much tax dollars are being taken and spent on that stuff. Is it like you could take all of my tax for the year, and if anyone's hiring, let me know. But like like that's what I mean. That is actually a lot of fucking money. If it's that much per person,
Yeah.
you could take all of my tax money and give it to any sort of like coal subsidy, and it still wouldn't be just my contribution to that. I want some of my fucking money to go to schools and hospitals and shit. Like it should. Fuck.
Oh, and then you figure in like, not private schools though, government. And not like offshore hospitals that we use as a prison to keep refugees in. I meant like real schools and real.
You know the thing in like that when you get your tax return back and it has like a one-pager sheet of like where it's gone to, like where
that is
like what.
always the most grim read.
And so much of it is welfare and schools and stuff like that. And then you just think about, okay, so I don't see a bar for corporate welfare on this. Where
It'll
is that?
be in like other
Roads.
or something.
Economic development.
I don't actually remember what that graph looks like. But keep in mind that these subsidies, they're not going towards like nationalized coal companies. They're going towards private companies that are making a profit.
Yeah, they're
We're
very,
essentially
very profitable.
Yeah, at the very
paying
least.
the profit from taxpayer money.
At the very, very fucking least, I would enjoy like us spending 29 billion to at least get all the tax money from our own like rocks that are being sent overseas.
Yeah,
like that
that'd be
just
great.
Yeah,
it's going to
Our
a
own rocks.
private.
$29 billion worth of auditors just sitting on there.
So shout outs this week. Shout out to Rise Refugees for helping organise the rally at Belmantra in Preston, which was currently housing 49 men in detention who have been there since July last year,
Yeah.
which is unfathomable.
Yeah.
I knew they were there, and then I sort of stopped hearing about it for a bit.
I thought that it was in the city, so finding out that it's like in the inner north, like that's
Yeah.
like my neighborhood. That's fucked up.
It's our sitting member of parliament should be all about that, getting rid of him. But
Oh yeah, she got in on refugee rights, and now her electorate's being used to imprison them. That's hey, Jed.
and there's like,
What the fuck?
there's legitimately like footage of these refugees who came over here. I'm pretty sure from the under medical evaluation, and they've just been in a hotel since July last year, tied up in red tape, which is disgusting. So
And they're not allowed to leave. They're only allowed to leave their rooms under supervision. They have
Really?
to stay on that floor. They're not
Stuck in
allowed
a
to.
hotel room.
Yeah, and they're not allowed to go outside.
Ugh.
me. So yeah, good on Rise for organising rallies on that and working as hard as they always do. So you can go to their website and donate, riserefugee.org. Also, shout out to the podcast Background Briefing, really cool ABC podcast that does long form journalism and reporting. They had a really good episode on how fracking could threaten Australia's Paris targets. They've got a lot of interviews with traditional owners of the land who are working in the NT to protect their lands and want to stop fracking, but they don't have the legal power to do so. There's a quote from the episode directly, which is just cool to know that they're actually doing this sort of stuff. Quote, the new industry could produce 117 million tonnes of greenhouse gases every year. To give you a sense of just how big that is, that's the equivalent to 22% of the entire nation's current emissions.
Yep. Fracking is really bad. Here's just a quick thing is you might sometimes hear that gas is a little bit more emissions friendly than coal. It's not. And if it's fracking, it's often worse. So yeah, there's really no excuse for fracking.
Oh yeah, for more information on the fracking stuff, check out our other episode, Methane Clown Posse, which I think is episode 4.
Mm-hmm. Other actions. I mean, we talked about Rise instead of just a shout out, but as an action, donate to Rise. You can definitely do that.
Attend their rallies.
Yeah, attend their rallies, keep up to date with that sort of stuff. I suppose follow them on social media to try to keep up with different types of rallies like that. And this is probably a good chance to shout out again Tom Tanuki's podcast, The Pork and Feed the Birds. At the end of his episodes, he has like a rally update.
Yeah, he's got his gig guide.
Yep. Yeah, essentially the rally gig guide that you can keep up to date with that. And be sure to call your local member as well, and just let them know what you think about any topic that you actually think about.
Yeah. I'm just going to spruik the idea of starting a group chat again. The main way that I hear about what rallies are coming up, because I do look at the calendar sites and I do look at like those, sort of Facebook event groups and that sort of thing that say what actions are coming up. But the main way that I hear about them is just by somebody else that I know mentioning in a politicsy group chat, is anyone going to such and such rally this weekend?
Yeah.
So having a small organization of people that you know that just talk about that sort of stuff is the best way to keep across these.
Just your
because
friends.
only one of you needs to find out about it. And now all of you know about it.
just your friends that are annoyed at politics or the environment or whatever. You don't want to constantly be piping up on your Facebook wall or in your current group chats about the environment because you're worried it'll bring everyone down. Have a chat just for that, where everyone can feel okay about being pissed off about things.
You can have more than one group chat.
Yeah.
You can have them for like different subjects.
There's no limit.
Dare to dream.
But yeah, like it's really like you'll find also that you feel like you're not alone. It's great to have, to reach out to those friends. Look, sometimes people will make you feel like, oh, you're making your own little bubble. But you know what? Bubbles are good.
Yeah.
It means that you talk about things.
Yeah, you're
It's
in a
great.
bubble if you stay in one bubble. But if you make multiple group chats across multiple vectors of your social circle, you're not in a bubble
They
anymore.
count as different bubbles.
You're in a bubble bath. And bubble baths are great.
Sell in a network.
All right, Sarah.
That's it.
Thanks again for listening to Not Good Enough. If you want to leave us a review on the podcast app, please do so. If you want to get in touch with us, we'd love to hear from you. Head to notgoodpod.com or shoot us an email, notgoodpod@protonmail.com. Not Good Enough is recorded on the stolen lands of the Kulin Nation. We want to acknowledge their leaders past, present and emerging and say yet again that sovereignty was never ceded.